Hi, everyone. Welcome to Last Book Alive. That's a podcast where friends get together and talk about books. My name is Meher Ali, and I am a freelance journalist and writer, and I am based in Aligarh, Uttar Pradesh, India. And I am joined by my good friend, Rim Aljabi, who is currently based in Amman, Jordan, and is originally from Syria. Hi, Rim.
Hello, dear.
How are you?
Fine, thanks. And how are you?
I'm good. I am so glad that we got together to talk about this book. I'm also glad that we figured out this way to record because I was having some technical difficulties.
Oh, I always have them all the time.
So, Reem, what book are we talking about today? Could you tell our audience?
Lovely. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast. I'm so happy to discuss this book with you. In English, it's called Sabriya, Damascus Bittersweet and Bittersweet. In Arabic, it's called Dimashqiya Basmat al-Huzn, Damascus, the sad smile. It's a book written by a famous Syrian female author called Ulfat Idilbi, who passed away in 2007. It's a very famous book in Syria. All my generation knows the story because it was also turned into a serial and also a film. It was made into a film. So it's one of the most famous novels back home.
Thank you for that introduction. So, Reem, I wanted to also ask you, I know I said a little bit about you, but could you also introduce yourself?
Okay, thank you. So as Meher told you, my name is Rim Aljabi. I'm from Damascus, Syria. I'm living currently in Amman. I'm a gender expert, and I'm in Amman because I'm the gender advisor for the MENA region, that is the Middle East and North Africa, for Search for Common Ground. So I'm the gender expert for the Middle East and North Africa.
Great. Now I wanted to ask you because I was trying to think about this. Do you remember how we met?
Yes, of course.
You remember? I know we met in Norwich.
Yeah.
So both of us studied in Norwich in UEA in England. But I don't remember the exact time when we started talking. I mean, I just always became friends with you, but I don't remember. Do you remember the first time we met?
I think it was through our friend Fanny. I mean, Fanny got to know me straight away, Fanny, and she knows you, our friend from Indonesia.
Fanti.
So she introduced me. Fanti, yeah. I have another friend, Fanti. Yeah. So she's the one who introduced us. And also there was Muhammad from Iran who was asking about Arabic female writers, and he was asking about. I remember her name. And so we were discussing, feminist writers in the Middle East and North Africa. And and you came along and introduced yourself. If I'm not mistaken, that was when we met. Yeah, it was Nitya Rao's lecture. Yeah. So it was our gender course, our gender and development course. And so that's when I met, and I asked you a funny question just to get to know you more. If you remember, I said, so do you know a guy called Fairuz in India? And you say, come on, we have lots of Fairuz. How should I know? Fairuz what? I don't know.
I
remember we had a guy called Fairuz with us at school. Well, I wanted to be, funny just to, make a good start.
But you wouldn't have had to because,
so that's how we met.
We instantly clicked, I think. And I think I also talked to you about Najib Mahfouz, right? Did I tell you about Najib Mahfouz?
You did, and you told me you were in Amman. I think you were already in Amman. So we had there was a lot to speak about. So that's why. I remember, he was asking me about Leila Ahmed, Professor Leila Ahmed. And you became interested and wanted to know more. So yeah, there was a lot to speak about. And surprisingly, we were speaking about books at that time and female writers in the MENA region. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's such a great segue because here we are talking about a woman author again. Thank you so much once again for joining me and for taking Sunday off to kind of discuss this really, really amazing book with me. So, but before we get into it, I also wanted to ask you, Reem, how did you come across this book?
So, as I told you from the beginning, this is a famous book. And when you told me, Reem, think of a book written by a Syrian author that you want to shed light on. So straight away, I told you, okay, Ulfat Idilbi, Sabriya. And I know it's translated into English. I know that for sure.
When did you first read it?
Right. Well, interesting enough, I actually saw the serials first and then read it. So, the serials were broadcasted on Syrian TV in the 1990s. The book itself was written in the 1980s, and it was made into episodes in 1990s. Yeah. So that's when I saw it. I used to read other stories written by Ulfat Idilbi, but usually short stories. And I usually like her style of writing. In Arabic, her style of writing is so straightforward, easy to read.
Yeah.
We have two forms of Arabic writing. You have either simple, straightforward, or you have complicated one. So hers was formal but easy style. So it was easy to read. So I read a lot to her of her writings. And then when I saw it on TV, I thought, it's worth reading as a book. So after seeing it on TV, I started reading it. So it was back in the 1990s.
Okay.
There's a lot of, it's a big book. It's not a small one. It's over 200 pages. Lots of details, lots of events in it. So, some of the events I've forgotten, I came back to read again. Yeah. But it's always good to read a novel twice. There are always things you miss out, you come back to.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, I just wanted to now discuss the plot of the book. It's a story about a woman called Sabriya who's living in Damascus, Syria in the 1920s. Okay, and it follows her life as a young woman who's full of ambition, love, and courage during Syria's quest for independence from the French. Syria was under the French mandate in this time in the 1920s. I believe until it gained independence in 1944, but it was under the French mandate until 1928.
Until the 1944, when we got independence, yeah.
So, okay. So Sabriya herself has to fight for her independence from her family, who seek to curtail her freedom and to control her. She is passionate about her studies and wants to be a teacher, and she is in love with a baker's son. There are some characters that I also wanted to talk about. So there's Sabriya's father, Al-Hajj Abdul Fatah al-Saruji, and the book actually begins with his death. He was paralyzed and he was bedridden for many years, and Sabriya is the one who takes care of him. He actually has 4 children, Raghib, who is the eldest, Sami, who is the most beloved to Sabriya, Mahmoud, who is the one who is aloof and indifferent from family problems and matters. And then, of course, there's Sabriya, who's the only daughter, and she's the youngest one. And the story actually unfolds through the reading of Sabriya's diary. And Sabriya has given it to her niece, Mahmoud's daughter, Salma. And Salma is the novel actually begins with Salma reading the diary, and then we get into the diary through this reading. And we find out about Sabriya's struggles and her life through this diary. We get to know that Sabriya is very close to her brother Sami, and Sami supports her. He supports her desire to become a teacher, and he supports her friendship with his good friend Adil, the baker's son. On the other hand, Raghib, her eldest brother, is actually the one who bullies her and tries to control her life. And Sabriya's life changes completely because she falls in love with Adil. And her life also changes because of Syria's struggle for independence from the French. Both Adil and Sami joined this independence struggle in the 1920s. But when Sabriya also becomes a part of it, she has to face the wrath and the anger of her traditional family. So will Sabriya be able to stand up to her family and their age-old customs? Will she and Adil find happiness? And will Sabriya herself become independent and free to live the way that she wants? Reem, do you want to talk a little bit about Ulfat Idilbi, the author of the book?
Yeah, sure. So, Ulfat Idilbi, the author herself, Syrian, born in Damascus. Actually, she was born in 1912 during the Ottoman period in Syria. Just before the French mandate, we had the Ottoman period, but then she died in 2007. So she herself lived through the incidents. I mean, the book, the settings were written, in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s in Damascus, in the old part of Damascus, because actually the way Damascus was built at that time, you have the main symbol in Damascus and still is the Umayyad mosque, and so all alleys were around the Umayyad mosque, and there was a church also, and there were also alleys around the church, and so and there was a citadel, and there was a tower all around the citadel. So this is where the Damascusian were, and the houses were built in a way that the alleys were small, and the alleys didn't look really nice from the outside, the houses, because it was just brick wall. But and you enter the house through a small opening, a door. But then once you enter the house, there is a big, a yard, a big yard before you really get to the rooms. And the yard was, the courtyard. Yeah, and it's usually well planted, lots of lemon tree, quince tree, yasmin, and the roses, the Damascusian rose, etc. So this is where really the women and the girls really, it's their kingdom there. And there is something called the Iwan, which is an opening, a room which is open from one side and closed from the three sides, where especially in summer, or especially when it's cool, you would sit there and just look out onto the courtyard. So, and in the middle there would be a pool also. So inside the house, it's lovely. Sabriya herself explains a lot about her house and how she feels, despite everything, she feels happy with this surrounding. So this is where Ulfat comes from, and this is where we all come from in Damascus, those of us who are from Damascus.
You mentioned that you also had a house in Salhiya, the old district of Damascus, where the author Ulfat Idilbi spent her childhood.
Exactly. So Salhiya is the second oldest place in Damascus after this place surrounding the mosque. So you have the old Damascus, which is all the alleys surrounding the mosque. And then Salkia was the first new quarter when people started to expand outside the tower of the citadel. So yes, Salkia is let's say a commercial district where all the shops, where you do all your shoppings, where the new part of the houses are. Yes, so yeah.
And I also wanted to add about Ulfat Idilbi that, in addition to what you said, that she herself was married at the age of 17 before she could complete her education. And yes, and she started writing at the age of 32 and published this book, Sabriya, at the age of 70 in 1980.
Yeah, exactly. She died at the age of 94. So yeah, we know that she published this book at a later age, but she also published other books. And she was, like Sabriya was influenced by her brother. Ulfat was influenced by her uncle, a well-known scholar at that time. His name was Kazim Dagestani, who was an author also at that time. So she was influenced by him. Yes, Ulfat is described, we know her as a self-educated woman and a nationalist. She also did take part in the national movement against the French occupation. And she is what we consider an eyewitness and a participant in the national movement of her period. She started off as self-educating and was influenced by all those who were around her, especially her uncle.
And she is very, very well known in the Arab world. Are any of her novels, including Sabriya, are they taught at the school or college level in Syria or anywhere else in the Arab world?
I know that her novel is taught in Arabic literature, yes. We have another very famous writer called Ghada Samman, whose books were used in literary criticism. She has actually written a number of books, not just Sabriya. She has also written like Qasas Shami, which means stories from Damascus. And she's written a book called The Last Decision, Al-Qarar Al-Akhir, back in 1947. And she has written another book about Damascus before Sabriya called Goodbye Damascus in 1963. And another one of these books has been turned into drama. So yes, we do read her books. But we see them mostly through drama.
I just wanted to share with our listeners the book that I read, which is the English translation done by Peter Clark, who has also translated other works from Arabic. This edition that I read was published by Interlink Books in 2003. And as Reem said, the original Arabic version was published in Damascus in 1980. And is titled Dimashq Ya Basmat al-Huzn, right, Reem?
Exactly, which means a sad smile. Damascus, a sad smile, or a smile of sadness.
That's so beautiful. And Reem, since you did start talking about Damascus, I actually wanted to bring that in first. In terms of Damascus itself, the city of Damascus, where this book is set, is itself a character because it's written about in great detail in this book, or mentioned in great detail. This is especially the case when Ulfat Idilbi is discussing the anti-French insurgency. So I wanted to ask you, did you yourself grow up in Damascus?
Yeah, well, I was born in Damascus. I am from Damascus, and I was born in Damascus. I spent like 7 years in England in my childhood years, from 7 to 13, and then I went back to Damascus. I continued my secondary school in Damascus, my university and then went back to England for my master. But yes, I mean, and then came back and worked in Damascus. I got married in Damascus. I mean, to a Tunisian, not a Damascusian. But yes, I mean, I'm of Damascus blood, yeah, and heart and soul.
So it was interesting to read about during the anti-French insurgency, how people from different neighborhoods in Old Damascus, they help each other during the revolt. We see that people from Jabal Druze sent weapons and men to another neighborhood called the Ghouta.
Mm-hmm.
And in another instance, the French bombard the oldest quarter of Damascus. And here I just wanted to read a little bit from the book. Saidi Amoud Street, which included the oldest and most prosperous houses, was totally gutted. In due course, that area and adjacent quarters became known as the Harika, or conflagration. Objects of value in Damascus, expensive trifles, evidence of successive ancient civilizations in our land, which had been cherished with the utmost care for generation after generation, all were destroyed, fuel for the flames of destruction. After this calamity, Damascus became like a humble dove that folds its wings over a fracture and remains silent in steadfast defiance. Damascus, a smile of sorrow, harboring tragedy. The secret of your eternal survival, dear Damascus, is that silence in the face of disaster.
Yeah, that's really beautiful. I mean, yes, Al-Hariqa, the Hariqa district of Damascus, it's in the oldest district near the Umayyad Mosque again. And it was, I mean, Hariqa means fire. And it was called fire after it was bombarded by the French. And history has it that we have in Damascus a famous mountain called Mount Qasyun. Jabal Qasyun, Mount Qasyun, yeah. So history has it that the French soldiers climbed the Mount Qasyun, and from there they sent bombs into the old district of Damascus, and this is why a fire took place. Yes, and as the story illustrates, yes, the houses at that time were really, as I told you, from the outside they looked very ordinary, but once you're inside, they're very beautiful houses, well decorated, well sculptured, well painted. So yes, there would have been a lot of antiques and a lot of historic sites that have been lost in the Hariqa. We still have some houses still standing, and I was lucky to see some of them. But unfortunately, yes, there has been a lot of destruction to the old part of Damascus. Yes.
So you've been to the that have been discussed in the book.
Oh, yes. I mean, these are the old, what we call the old souk. That's the old place, the old merchant. These are like the Turkish bazaar places where you have, they're covered. There's big streets covered, and each alley would be selling somewhere something. In Arabic, called "Tfaddali ya Sit," which means, "Madam, please welcome." Literally a translation. Tfaddali, please come in. Which and there they sell all kinds of textile and materials, especially if somebody is preparing for a wedding or an engagement or for something really important, they would go and get the fabric from there. So this is why it's called the Tfaddali ya Sit, please, madam, come. Yeah.
Please, madam, come.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Reem, what were some of the themes that you found most interesting in Sabriya?
I like the way, I mean, as you read out, I like the way Ulfat was able to really illustrate how, let's say, the revolution took place and how everybody was helping each other. I mean, when she is referring to Jabal Druze, Druze mounts, and she's referring to Sweden in the south of Syria. And
Yeah.
we know that there a big revolution started there against the French mandate, and
Yeah.
it was led by Sultan Atrash, who is one of the symbol of Syrian revolution. So I like the way she highlighted how this issue took place. But socially speaking, I mean, and as I told you, I've seen the film, I've seen the drama, and I've read the book. I like the way that Ulfat really, highlights gender issues, so norms, traditions, and how the characters are placed. I mean, not all. Okay, Sabriya was forced to lead a life that was imposed on her by decision taken from male relative members, and unfortunate to her, the one who was more open-minded and who was really willing to help her, her brother Sami, who was really encouraging her to continue studies, etc., died in the war. So she was left under the mercy of her two other brothers, especially her eldest brother, who was jealous on how she was really doing well in her studies. He wasn't. And so, and how traditions and norms of that time, which is still ongoing. I mean, of course, it's not as strict as it used to be in the 1920s, but we still see, we can still relate to things that Sabriya went through. In brief, and women back home usually they don't take all the decision regarding their life. Is as if it is regarding their education, regarding who they want to marry, regarding what they want to do. Usually it's members of the family, and especially males member of the family, who either decide for them or who have the last say around it. So I like the way she depicts that. But at the same way, she doesn't only, show only the negative side of women. She also have other characters who are strong-willed.
So, Reem, you were talking about Raghib just now, and you gave us this really interesting analysis about him and how it actually connects to the idea of masculinity in Syria right now. And I wanted to just read this passage. It's from the time when Sabriya has joined the protest against the French, and this is without her family knowing. It is only her brother Sami, as you said, who encourages her, and she joins the protest. She's with her lover Adil, and she is returning home after the protest, and Raghib has spotted her, and so this is when she enters the home. And this is all said in first person because this is Sabriya's diary that we are reading. Raghib stood at the door waiting for me. When I reached him, he opened the door for me and followed me in. He then punched me hard in the face. "Bitch, where have you been?" he said. I made no reply. I hurried in along the corridor to the courtyard. My parents were standing there in the middle, looking towards me. "Where have you been, damn you?" Mother said. "The evening prayer has been called and you have been out of the house." Father then shouted at me. "Where have you been?" "I was in the demonstration with the other girls," I said with great pride. "You were in a demonstration without my knowledge?" said father. "I do not have daughters who go on demonstrations with young men." He then struck me a blow in the face that made me stagger. Then he hit me again and I caught my balance. The blows came one after the other on my face as I stood stolidly before him, challenging him to strike further. With each blow he shouted, "From now on there's to be no more college, no more demonstrations. You will not go out of the house. No college, no demonstrations." Finally, Mother tried to intervene, but she got hit too. "Enough, enough, Abu Raghib," she said out of breath. "Have you gone crazy? She pulled me away by the hand and pushed me into my bedroom, closing the door behind me. Yeah.
Yes.
So, and then what happens is once she gets beaten, the family then suspects that she may actually have been raped by the French because she was protesting. Yeah, she was protesting against them, and so they may have detained her at the police station, and during that time have raped her. So then the family calls a woman. Her name is Fawzil. Fawzil, yeah, Fawzil is
a midwife.
She's basically called to check to see if Sabriya is still a virgin.
Exactly.
Right? Okay, so I just want to read that section as well. Fawzi left the room. I heard her say to father in her harsh voice, Allah above offers prayer to the Prophet. My girl Sabriya, praise be to Allah, is as sound as a golden pound coin. By which she meant she wanted a golden pound coin as her fee. Father, of course, paid that willingly, having been reassured of the fine honor of the family that lay concealed between my thighs. My thighs, me, alone of all the family. When Fawzi left, I came out of the room and went towards the stairs. I did not turn towards the Iwan, where father and Raghib were, but stamped past them to let them know of my anger. I hurried upstairs to my room and threw myself onto my bed, feeling as if I had been torn to pieces by wild dogs. Degradation and misery oozed out of every pore of my skin. They want to take me out of college just 1 year before I get my certificate. They want to incarcerate me in the house. An insensate scream rose from deep inside me and was stifled in my throat, like the death rattle of a wild animal that is wounded in the jungle.
Mm-hmm.
So powerful.
Yeah. I mean, several times she does describe herself as a wounded animal who has been, just been sophisticated and left to her misery. And it just shows also how women's role are predicted. I mean, they're not even allowed to participate in national events and be involved in national, let's say, freedom. Calls for freedom.
Struggle, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even till today, I mean, I've heard a lot of stories from women, Syrian women, how when they did get detained, and when they were set free afterward, their family looked in shame, felt that shameful toward them, although it is not their fault for being detained. Whereas if a man was detained for the same reason and he was set free, he would be looked on as a hero. Yeah. So yes, till today we do have this discrimination of what is the role of woman and what is the role of man. We do have it that it's the family's honor in the end is placed within how well kept their females are. And losing one's virginity before getting married, even if it's not her fault, it would be a disaster. I mean, it can lead to honor killing even. So yes, so she well depicted. So Ulfat Idilbi well depicted, showed this photo. I mean, although Sabriya saw herself as a strong woman, educated woman who was fighting a cause, a national cause. No, that's not the way her parents saw her. Her parents were just worried about the fact that she would be raped, and if she's raped, nobody would marry her. Yeah.
You actually mentioned something that I would like to know a little bit more about. You said that even now, when a woman joins a protest, then the consequence is that their family kind of doubts their, I don't know, their virtuousness is, and they're basically isolated. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I've heard it. I mean, to be honest, it's not as common as it was before. I mean, we did hear that in several cases. No, there would be understanding. The family would understand the circumstances, but still, a lot of families. Yes, I heard it from several girls that a lot of families have just denounced the girls for being detained. Sometimes they wouldn't even be participating in a protest. They would just be detained, detained for any reason. The last 10 years in Syria has been years of, let's say, insane. And so, we have had lots of incidents where you would get detained for no reason. I mean, sometimes it's because of a protest and sometimes for no reason, really. And so, yes, we have had, rape, all over the world, rape is used as a weapon of war against women. And that's why we have the Women, Peace and Security agenda, for example. But, yes, till today, if a woman does get raped, or is detained, or human trafficking is increasing. So if they are trafficked, yes, a lot of time, the family would just say, okay, خلاص, we can't protect you, and you have you're being خلاص, so you're being contained, and you cannot, and they're outcasted. Yeah, they're outcasted, completely outcasted, if not killed. Yeah.
And I mean, I think this particular passage that I read, I think what is really tragic in this is that we know, as we read other parts of the book, that her father loves her, and she loves him. She loves him because she stays with him and she takes care of him when he's paralyzed. But he sets aside that love for her, and basically, as a man, family honor is more important to him than his daughter's life.
Yes.
All that love goes because suddenly he is now just a man who's protecting his family's honor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And there is,
Go ahead.
And there's something very important also. I mean, the way he brings up the children. I mean, there is, we understand why there is hatred between Raghib, her brother, who is 6 years older than her, and herself. I mean, Raghib was, a loser at school. I mean, he failed in his education, and he couldn't put himself together, whereas Sabriya was doing well. And at one time, I mean, the father does say, I mean, this girl is doing well, although she's a girl, whereas you as a boy you're not doing well at school. So this comparison also, I mean, the father himself is creating this toxic masculinity in Raghib without noticing. And Sabriya once said, why does he always compare Raghib to me and not compare him to the other brothers? And we know that it's to further humiliate him. To further humiliate Raghib is to compare him to a girl. So, it's like also looking down on a girl. I mean, although the father is praising her, but he's actually unconsciously looking down at her. So he's comparing the brother to a girl, not comparing to another brother, which brings more humiliation. And that's why Raghib becomes very, angry and very tempered toward his sister, and even violent.
I'm glad that you mentioned this, because this was something that I actually had as well, that exactly what you said. So I just wanted to read that passage to our listeners, just to illustrate exactly what you just said. I will never forget the day I finished one school year and passed into the 4th grade. I went back home that day carrying the report with grades that I had passed with flying colors. I had a certificate of appreciation as well, commending my brightness and diligence. The family were all gathered together in the Iwan for lunch. I rushed up to father and gave him the report card and the certificate, feeling very pleased with myself. He read them aloud, kissed me, and said, "I've got a precious present for you. It's a gold bracelet, like the one last year, isn't it, Abu Raghib?" said mother. Father nodded his head. "If Allah wills it, if Allah wills it," he said. Father then turned to Raghib, my eldest brother, who had failed in his grades that year. "You're a fool," he said. "And this girl, who is 6 years younger than you, is worth 10 of you. Aren't you utterly ashamed in her presence? She has succeeded in her grade, and you have failed in yours. You spent all your time fooling about and dreaming, while she has been at her books studying. What is a man's value in this day and age unless he has some education and qualifications?" Raghib hung his head in shame, blushed, and said nothing. "If I had been luckier," father went on, "you would have been born a girl and she a boy."
Exactly.
Yeah. I found myself laughing at this in spite of myself. This is Sabriya. It was hard to imagine Raghib as a girl. His voice was broken and he was sprouting a mustache. When father left and my brothers Mahmoud and Sami after him, Raghib took the opportunity to vent his wrath on me. He hit me and punched me, saying, "How dare you laugh at me, damn you! You will not laugh at me from now on." I cried out and called for mother's help. My nose was bleeding and I almost fainted. She came quickly and cursed at him and said she would complain to father. He was insolent. "Do as you like. If you feel you can't do without a daughter, I shall carry on hitting her until she stops laughing in my face." Father never realized, perhaps out of ignorance of child psychology, that what he did was plant seeds of hatred in the hearts of 2 of his children.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And I think that if we compare, like the word that you use, toxic masculinity, I think that's a really accurate way of portraying both Raghib and his father. Where though the father loves her, as we said before, he basically casts aside that love to protect the family honor. Raghib, on the other hand, is a person who understands how patriarchy works, how the system works, and how it gives him power. And so he uses it to his advantage to get what he wants and, to basically oppress Sabriya. So my question to you, Reem, was, who do you think causes the most harm to Sabriya between Raghib and his father?
Unconsciously, it's the father. I mean, it's not intendedly. I mean, this is how he was brought up. This is how the society is brought up. The society always wish that her male at that time wish her male children are more successful, especially as he said, as Abu Raghib says, that during that time having an education has become as very important, and especially for boys. So for him, in his unconsciousness, is like, well, this boy has to get married. He has to be the breadwinner of the family. So he has to get a really good education to get a really good job. So that's what he's thinking. For him, I mean, to Sabriya, it's good that she's doing well at school. That's good. But in the end, it's, the female stereotype. As Raghib said, she'll get married and she will have her husband to take care of her. So, and this is something we see till today. I mean, when we speak about, why families favor the sons more than the girls. It's because they believe that they will they become a breadwinner, and also I mean, when the parents become in their old age, during the old age, it's supposed to be the son who looks after his father or mother.
Okay.
That's the norm. The norm is that the sons are the ones who should take care of their parents in old age. So yeah, so that's why and don't forget he's the firstborn. And you know, in the Arabic norm, the father and the mother are named after their firstborn. So the firstborn is Raghib. That's why he is called Abu Raghib, and the mother is called Raghib. So for them, it's important, especially the firstborn is successful. And in the end, I mean, because in society, if he becomes a failure, everybody will be speaking. No one will leave them alone. And so everyone around them will be speaking, they didn't bring him up properly. He became a failure. They spoiled him too much. And you can tell, I mean, in one part, there is this like debate between the mother and the father, Abu Raghib, Raghib. You spoiled him. No, you didn't bring him up. And everybody's trying to blame the other for the way Raghib turned out to be. So I think it's the father, but then the father is also a victim of the society, of the norms and traditions in the society. So it's it's an endless circle.
Circle.
Yeah.
But also in some ways it is unfortunately a circus where it's Sabriya's life that everybody's playing with. And,
exactly.
Yeah. So actually another pillar that holds up the patriarchy in Sabriya's world is her mother, Salma or Raghib, as you just mentioned. And then also there are the daughters-in-law, the wife of Abu Raghib and the wife of
Mahmoud.
Mahmoud. I'm sorry, Mahmoud. And both of them, after the father passes away, they want to throw Sabriya out of the house. They completely agree with the Sabriya's brothers that she should leave the house. Yeah. So in a way, I felt that even though Raghib and the father were, they were definitely the people who kind of controlled Sabriya's life and took really important decisions for her, the mother especially really was kind of a silent witness to everything and didn't really speak up for her daughter. Even for instance, when Sabriya is doing, she wants to get Sabriya married off, and it's only when Sami, Sabriya's brother, explains to the mother that it's really important that Sabriya finishes her teacher training, that the mother kind of pays attention to it, but otherwise she's not bothered. What did you think about Raghib?
Yeah. I mean, she is the typical, what we call the typical mainstream of Arab mothers. Although, I mean, I like the way Ulfat also brings in Raghib's sister, Rashid, to show that yes, you can have strong characters. At the same time, you can have strong female characters. But I mean, Rashid is described as the sister of men. And of course, when you have a strong woman character, she's always has to be compared to men. But I mean, yes, Raghib, she is the mainstream, Arab woman. But at the same time, she's also the typical woman who knows how to get what she wants from her husband. But for her, for her, she also believes that Sabriya will end up in her husband's house. A girl has to end up getting married. And for her, the most important person is her eldest son. Mothers always find that there's something around the eldest son in particular. So despite she knows that he's a failure, that he's not really good, he's done a lot of bad things, behavior-wise, moral-wise, etc. But she keeps on defending him, and she keeps on, around her husband to try to help him, despite everything. Whereas she does not do the same for Sabriya. For Sabriya, she's convinced when Raghib says that in the end she has to get married, and he actually, tells her put on makeup when there's matchmakers and when there
Yes.
are yeah, and so she's convinced, yes, this is what should be this is where Sabriya should end up, like all young women. So yeah, so she blazed. I mean, she blazed the mainstream, let's say, typical Arab woman. And I like the way Sabriya says, and there's a lot of the emotions, lots of things she would really love to discuss with her mother. She wished she could
Yes.
discuss, but she knows that she can't. I mean, it would be useless to speak them out with her mother. Yeah, the mother did have a negative, if also impact on the decision for Sabriya. I mean, Sabriya wanted to take a decision, but because of the mother, she felt instead of the mother feeling responsible for Sabriya, in the end, Sabriya felt responsible for the mother. So she showed a lot of selfishness, selfless Sabriya toward her
what is the
family.
decision you're talking about? You can go ahead and share it.
Yeah, well, when the mother got sick after Sami died, so
Yes.
Sabriya really wanted to take the decision of how she wanted to, the future of her life to take the decision of marriage. But then her mother got sick, and she knew that if she left, nobody would take care of her mother, and she would feel, she would have a prickle of conscience all her life. So she decided to put her mother interest first, and her interest came last.
And I think that also, like, they came last, but they came at a cost, because it's not that Sabriya is okay with that decision. In fact, what I love about this book is that it doesn't portray Sabriya as some kind of an angel. There is resentment and there is anger in Sabriya for being the one who is basically, stuck in a way with taking care of her mother and then her father. And I think what is so unique about this book and about this character of Sabriya, actually very objectively see her family members, in a very objective way. So I just wanted to read a passage connected to what we just right now we're speaking about. Self-centeredness seems to be an inescapable characteristic of humankind. Nobody, not even mothers, are immune. Frequently, mother used to offer this prayer to me: "May Allah send you, my daughter, a handsome young man who will delight your heart and mind." She would then turn to those around her and say, "I make this vow that when my Sabriya gets married, I'll present her with this magnificent carpet. My father gave it to me on the day I got married." She used to point to the huge carpet that covered the whole of the reception room. But now she is ill. Her tongue no longer utters this prayer and this vow. She seems to have forgotten about the matter of my marriage. Who is going to tend to her and to care for her in her loneliness if I wed?
Yeah, exactly. And the carpet has a lot of symbols also. It was given to the mother by her father when she got married. In the Arab world, that especially in Syria, that you present a bride with a really huge gift when you get married, because all the other issues related to marriage, the bridegroom, he's the one who settles it. So I mean, Sabriya, because she knew خلاص انه she's not going to get married, because the time has passed. She has the train has gone, has left the station, and so she does a part like marking the anniversary of 40 days after her father death. And she does a very big feast, which was overreacted.
Yeah.
And then and her brothers wonder why did she do it, and well, they were more surprised about where did she get the money from to do the
Yes.
feast rather than why she did the feast. And it turned out that she sold the carpet to a foreign, to a foreigner. And they told her, how could you do something without our permission? She told them, well, you know that mother said this is for me, for my wedding. They, well, but you didn't get married. Consider this as my marriage. So yeah,
Yes.
there was a lot of symbols in that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so yeah, that was really powerful, yani the way she pictured it. Yeah.
That it kind of seems that the carpet is a symbol of wealth, and it's the only
Yes.
thing that Sabriya has left in the world to make a
And
bargain with.
heritage. Yeah,
Sorry?
exactly. And heritage also.
Yes.
And letting go of heritage slowly.
Wow, yes, that's true. That's a really interesting observation. Yeah, I didn't think of that. So while we have all of this happening, all of these terrible things and kind of various unfortunate events in Sabriya's life, the novel is also full of life, and it's also full of happiness, and it's also full of laughter for Sabriya. It's not all sad. And the two people who really light up Sabriya's world are Sami and Adil.
Yeah.
And so I think that, while the father and the brother, Raghib, represent toxic masculinity, her other brother, Sami, and her lover, Adil, are perhaps a healthier expression of masculinity. What do you think, Reem?
Exactly. They were the positive masculinity. As we put it in modern terms, I mean, these are the modern terms where we use it in gender. Yes, of course, I mean, both Sami and Adil are the ones who really encourage her to study, to read, to become educated. I mean, Adil like her for her, for being a girl who reads, who love books. He shares books with her. He even discussed with her books, and this is something you don't find a lot all the time. And Sami really tried to defend his sister. Tried to talk her out of marriage, tried to talk his parents out of marriage, and do not marry her off, and please let her take her education. And he even did state that it's important for a girl to take a certificate. And even when the father did say, well, we don't want our girls to work, and he said, well, look for the future, think of the future. What if something happens that obliges her to work? Maybe you never know what the future holds for her.
Yes.
Maybe she does need her education, so don't just throw her into vagueness and into the darkness, and let her her education will secure her, would be an insurance for her future. So yeah, he had a really good outlook into what will happen. Sami and Adil, whereas it was different with the father and the eldest brother, and the middle brother was really indifferent about everything, which makes him as negative as Raghib and Abu Raghib.
Yeah, I actually wanted to read just a bit up, just so that it explains how rich it is, the interaction between Sami, Adil, and Sabriya. So this is the time when Sabriya and Adil and Sami are taking coffee in the Ilwan, which is the landing. Sami came back in. I poured out the coffee and we drank it. It was the sweetest coffee I tasted in all my life. I felt as if I was in a dream. Sami, Adil, and myself sipping coffee together in the A-ray. It was unbelievable. I savored these moments and stored them up in my inner consciousness. Most of the time we talked about the books we planned to read during the summer vacation. I wrote a long list of titles Adil suggested of books he had either read or heard of. All these were apart from the books that were easy enough to borrow, a wonderful treasure trove for the summer which I planned to devour ravenously. I was feeling confident and triumphant. Life was opening up. So, Reem, as we were discussing, we were talking about Sami and Adil and how Sabriya's life just because of these two. And we were talking about how they are a contrast to the toxic masculinity of brother Raghib and her father. So I wanted to actually, what this made me think about was that maybe one way of looking at it is that a healthy expression of masculinity is when it helps lift others up, but not by doing for them, but encouraging others to do themselves. And I wanted to get your thoughts on what has the idea of what it means to be a man changed in Syria, and how? What have you observed?
Yes, thanks for that question. Certainly, yes, certainly. I mean, of course, find toxic masculinity, but you also find a lot of positive masculinity. And I think it's mainly because education was open for everyone and is still open for everyone in Syria. There was a lot of focus on education, like in all over the MENA region, the Middle East and North Africa region. So I think this was one of the main factors why, the notion of masculinity has changed. Yeah, you find, I mean, it's more acceptable, of course, like everywhere in the world, that women do obtain their education, even high education, postgraduate, and they join the labor force. But what is strange, I mean, what is surprising in the Arab world is that although we have some of the highest, let's say, jumps in terms of women obtaining education, and in many places you will find more women than men actually obtaining higher education. However, this doesn't reflect well in the labor force. We still have the region, the MENA region, including Syria, has some of the lowest women's participation in the labor force. So this shows, I mean, we go back to the idea of tradition, norm, gender stereotyping, and this really shows how gender norms, traditions are really still strong in the Arab world. Gender norms are changing, but still they're very. We still have a long way to go. Yeah.
Can you give us an example of how they have changed?
Yeah, so we have more actually women than men obtaining high education, for example, postgraduate education. But that's because, unfortunately, that's because, those who aren't able to get married usually end up obtaining their education because there's nothing else to do for them. Also, you have a lot of women in high positions. You have female ministers, female head managers, senior positions, etc. But still, still it's still very low. For example, women participation in parliament is still around 12%, which is actually low compared to the minimum 30% set by the UN. So yes, we do have women leaders. We do have women head of NGOs, but still not what we acquire. And let me say something. There is really a difference between when we're speaking about tradition and when we're speaking about religion. And this is something that even Ulfat Idilbi in this novel, Sabriya, tries to highlight. For example, she does, as you remember, mention the name of female characters who were known to be among the first in when the Islamic religion was, in its first years of immersion. So she refers, for example, to Nusayba bint Ka'b, who is the heroine during the early, actually, rise of Islam, and how she was really involved in the Battle of Uhud, one of the famous battles in Islam. And she also speaks of, for example, Khawla bint al-Azwar, who is also a very famous heroine and a poet who we all study at school back in Syria. And she's she's a figure who is known for being strong, being one of them among the first women in Islam to actually, embrace Islam and empower it. So she tries to show, indicate, to show that Islam is not really hostile to women, as some of the doctrine tries to show, but actually it's a matter of tradition. So there is a great, unfortunately, although sometimes tradition is mingled with Islam, and a lot of what takes place as tradition is explained as being Islamic. But no, there's a great difference between what the Islam does say and what tradition says. But unfortunately, sometimes they're interlinked in a very in a negative way.
And I think that that's actually a really good point to make, to differentiate. And I think it kind of connects to our own discussion about the difference between toxic masculinity and a healthy expression of it. And both are existing in the same house, let alone the same neighborhood or country. So I think it's more about, well, perhaps we can say that tradition is the status quo, it's the norm. But then, in contrast to the status quo, there is another kind of tradition which says that it's okay to question norms, and it is okay to pursue. In fact, it is right to pursue one's own dreams and to stay true to one's own wishes. And both of these kind of perhaps fight for supremacy, and sometimes one wins and sometimes another wins. I don't know. Exactly. That's another way to.
Yeah, exactly, and especially, and don't forget, the setting takes place in the, early 19th centuries, around 1920, 1930, 1940, and at that time, if we look at the, historically at the Arab world, it's also a time that we were under occupation and were under a mandate. But it's also a time when, the Arab woman movement started, or let's say feminist movement started, all kinds of movements and all kind of Renaissance idea back in the Arab world started. So there were also figures at that time, female figures who were well known and who played a really important role in the advancement of and empowerment of women. For example, in Egypt, we have a very famous female character called Huda Sha'rawi, who is well known all over the Arab world, who was among the first feminist pioneers who called for the rights of women to education and to work and to participate in the public sphere. In Lebanon, we have also Ibtihaj Khaddura, also who had the same doctrine, and also we have in Syria we also have the famous Adila Bayham al-Jazairi, who was the first who established the first woman union back in Syria in the early 1940s. And also women played an important role during the war for independence. I read a lot about Adila Bayham, and I know how she during the war of independence of Syria, she really pushed toward education, labor, women's right to labor, because men were at war. She also supported the military, the Syrian militias who were fighting against the French army through providing them with food, with medicine, supporting their families, those who went to war and were left, and for families who were left with no head of household. So she supported them. So there's, I mean, women did play a lot of roles during the early 19th century, and this is where really the feminist movement back in Syria started. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. That adds to this book in the sense that that's really an amazing kind of added insight, because that who herself is a revolutionary, these women are existing side by side with other people who are seeking to suppress or curtail their freedom. So this really gives a wonderful context to this book. And in connection with that, actually, I wanted to read a passage where Sabriya is talking about her love for Adil. And I like the way that she contrasts two realities that she has to live with. So I just want to read that. Where had all this beauty been hidden? Whenever I imagined myself in Adil's arms, I could feel a tremor of delight. I wondered whether I was dreaming. How long would we be kept apart? We would have to steal moments which we had a right to enjoy. We would live in an atmosphere of fear. We would have to practice deception just to obtain fleeting encounters that were not enough to gratify our desire. Half the nation was shackled in chains created by men. That is a wrong we refuse to acknowledge. So
that's beautiful. Yeah,
it's beautiful, and it connects to what you were saying. Like, you know, you had all these women who were fighting. I would say for the rights of women, but also generally Syrians. But in contrast to that, the men of the country were perhaps fighting only one battle, which was the battle against the French. And so I think this is a very astute observation by Sabriya in such a simple way. She says, you know, that, you know, we can fight the French, but we ourselves turn against each other when it's a matter of love, or when it's a matter of marrying somebody of your own choice rather than marrying someone that your family has chosen for you. So I wanted to ask you, now in Syria, is it like this? Can you marry someone that you like rather than someone that is chosen by your parents or your elders? What is the tradition nowadays?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, definitely you can. Yeah, I mean, it's unlikely that you really marry someone that you don't want or forced by your parents. I mean, it does happen, but no, it's not the norm anymore, and it's something that is looked down upon. I mean, if somebody knows of someone who is forced to marry someone she doesn't want, this is not something that is acceptable in the community anymore. So yeah, we have come a long way from what used to take place. But the matter is, usually they marry off a girl to someone who is considered of the same status and the same position, the same class. So usually it's rather than it's a union, it's an agreement, it's something, it's a part. I mean, don't forget her father is a merchant, so it's a part of a deal, you know. And they believe in this way, only this way they can protect their girl. I mean, I don't think they didn't want her to marry Adil because they're against love, as much as that they believe that if she does marry Adil and he's from a lower class than she is, then she wouldn't live happily with him. He's not the same class. So this is how marriage was really organized. It was organized in a way that, okay, we believe that we have to find the suitable husband for our daughter, who would be in the same class as we are, so that they so that she lives in a good way, comfortably with him. And this is for families who are rich. For families who are who don't really care about their daughter, or who have economic problems, it's to have less member of the family to care about. For example, during war, during famine, during economic conflicts, etc. So they would marry off a girl so that she would be somebody else burden. Also, I mean, I worked with UNICEF for as a consultant for a year, and I have noted, and I have come across such situations where families because of the war that has taken place in Syria, and because of the lack of economic capacity, they would marry off their girls to anyone who would give a dowry. That's another important aspect, and who would take care of her. Yeah, that does happen during such a crisis. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to give our listeners the context, when you're talking about war, this is a civil war in Syria, and it started in 2011. It started as anti-government protests that erupted in not only Syria but all of the Arab world. In Syria, particularly, it was challenging President Assad's rule, and this series of protests that erupt across the Arab world has come to be known as the Arab Spring. And in Syria, the violence continues till today. And the impact has been that there have been more than 600,000 deaths till March 2021. There are 100,000 people missing, and 6.9 million people have been internally displaced. Is there anything you want to add to that, Reem?
Yeah, and over 80% of the Syrian population is under the poverty line. Also, live in poverty. Yeah.
So basically, this helps us to understand the dire situation in Syria and how that impacts women. And as you just mentioned, that perhaps families, because they're suffering so much, women kind of become unfortunately a bargaining chip for families who have them.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly. And also, I mean, but at the same time, and because female-headed household, woman-headed household increases, because I mean, men have just vanished, either due to death, due to detainment, due to migration. So it's women who are taken over, who become also the main breadwinners in the family. Sometimes even boys are taken out of school to work as child labor. And the girls stay at home to are taken out of school to stay at home, take care of the children, of the siblings, or are married off. Human trafficking, as I said, especially against girls and women, have tremendously increased during the last 11 years. The thing is that, I mean, it's not a matter of working, finding a livelihood opportunity, but the problem is that the traditional Syrian society is built on the fact that women stay at home as the housewives and the men who work outside, breadwinners.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, women found that they had to be the main breadwinner, and they're not prepared for that. So that was the main problem. And this is why, I mean, during the gender training that I conduct, I always raise awareness on the fact that you have to give opportunities to women. You know, like Adil said to his mother, to his mother, don't marry her off because you
Sami,
don't know
yeah.
what the future will hold for her. You just let her get her education, and this is what we really focus on. Let women get their education. Let them work, because I mean, it's not guaranteed that they would always be protected. They would always there would be somebody to protect them all the time. And it's another thing. I mean, it's their human rights to actually choose what they want to do, to actually select what they really want to do. So this
Yeah.
is what we try to advocate for.
So now that there are so many female-headed households in Syria, has that perhaps
Hmm.
in some ways been in some ways an unfortunate event, of course, that the men have vanished, but has that helped women to kind of gain control of perhaps resources or gain more autonomy? Can
That's
that?
a really good question. Yeah. No, unfortunately, not much. That has not really, I mean, women do not have more rights just because they are participating in the labor force. Oh, they are bringing, they, they become the breadwinners of the house. This does not mean that they are more entitled to rights, as logic would predict. Because I mean, especially that it has been done under negative circumstances, and it has been done under not planned conditions, and not planned circumstances, not planned environment, but it's just forced. It was forced on them. So no, none of the indicators so far, and there's been, and to be honest, there is still very little researches and very little studies. But the little studies we have doesn't show that there is actually a link between their economic empowerment and their economic endowment. No, not much still.
I wanted to now talk about Sabriya, because I think what makes this book so powerful is her central character. And I think what I liked about her was that she was not presented as a victim, but neither was she presented as someone who was good or noble. And, a very complicated person. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, actually, she's just very human, right? So
Mm-hmm.
there are two examples that I wanted to share with you that that struck to me, like, why did she do what she did? So the first one is that Sabriya does not finish her teacher training, even though she has just 1 year left. And that happens after the altercation that she has with her father and her brother, where she's beaten up badly. And the second one is when her friend Nimrin, she has a friend called Nimrin who was Sami's lover, but as circumstances, turned out, she was married off to an older man, and then basically is going to run away with her hairdresser to escape her husband and her mother. And she
Mm-hmm.
comes to say goodbye to Sabriya, and Sabriya slaps her and basically admonishes her and judges her for leaving. So why do you think that she doesn't finish her schooling, even though her parents later say she can? And why do you think she doesn't run away like Nirmin does?
Hmm. I don't think that she could have finished her schooling because she was forced due to her elder brother Raghib nagging at his father. She was forced out of school, especially after she participated in the protest.
Yes.
I think it was, I mean, Raghib, because he was jealous that she was very successful at school where he wasn't, so he was the one behind forcing her out of school. So
Yes,
I don't think
he
that.
was, but then afterwards, when she is secluded in her house, her brother Raghib has married off and left the house. His father throws him out of the house, and Sabriya is very happy about that. And so are we. But then she doesn't go back, even though her parents say, you can go back, but she is very upset about it. So,
I remember that part. I think it's because, she found that she has grown old. And I think that's one issue, that she doesn't want to go back with younger girls. But I also think it's because, actually who motivated her to go to school was Sami and Adil. And they're not there anymore.
Yeah.
So I think, the stimulation is not there. And I think everything changed for her. And maybe it's because she really doesn't believe that her parents were genuine in saying that, yes, go back to school. And don't forget that, because she was always, first in class. And so going back after all these years, maybe she doesn't feel that she will become as successful as she was when she was at school. So yeah, I think yes, and as you said rightly, as you said, she is. She does have a complicated character. So she's not like all good or all advanced. Don't forget, she lives within different people, so she would have also been influenced by other people in an indirect way. So I think these are the factors that have really, participated in her saying no, she's not going to go back to school. And I think because even if she was starting to think about going back to school, but then her mother gets sick, and so there's no way she could get back, even if she wanted.
Yeah. I don't know. I definitely think that if she wanted to do it, she could have done it. And in fact, she could have done it much more easily now that Raghib is out of the picture. But I think she is, in some ways, extremely depressed and extremely sad that both Sami and Adil are not in her life anymore at this point. And she's really kind of, I don't know, but and what about Nimrin? Why do you think that she slaps Nimrin and doesn't, why do you think that she treats Nimrin like that? Can I just first read what she does with Nimrin?
Please go ahead.
To give a context to the listeners, because it's pretty brutal, their confrontation. So this is when Sabriya is now alone with her father in the house. Her mother has passed on, and her father is now paralyzed, and Sabriya spends day and night taking care of him. On Monday evening after sunset, there was a persistent knocking at the front door. I went quickly to open it. I knew it was Nirmin. Since father had become ill, nobody called at this time of night. I put a light on in the corridor and opened the door. It was as if I expected. Nirmin came in amid a cloud of expensive perfume. She was dressed elegantly, gorgeously. Her eyes were so bright they seemed to be dancing. She took me in her arms and came to kiss me passionately. I did not respond, but tried to recoil from her and keep my distance. I was afraid of what she was up to. She grabbed both my hands and looked at me in the eye. I can't leave this town without seeing you and saying goodbye, she said. I'll give you my address and we can write to each other. I stared at her angrily. You've done it then, Nirmin, I said. Who are you running away with? I was unable to say more without hurting her. With my hairdresser, Wanis. She had already mentioned her hairdresser, but I had not given him any thought or any importance. Involuntarily, I removed my hands from her and slapped her on the cheek with all the force I could muster. You stupid girl, aren't you destroying your reputation and risking the wrath of Allah, all for the sake of an Armenian hairdresser? No, no, Nirmin, you're worth more than that. You're crazy, she said with feeling. Hysterical. Don't you know that what brings on the wrath of Allah is treachery, dishonesty, and hypocrisy? And that what pleases him is loyalty, honesty, and openness? And with him, all people are equal. I love this man. I have found in him a nobility, an honorableness, and manliness. I am convinced that he is the only person who can take me away from my hell and rescue me from my unrighteous marriage, which is pleasing neither to Allah nor to anyone with a conscience. Enough, enough, I said.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a powerful paragraph. And yeah, and in the end, she really brings out why she took this attitude toward Nirmin. She was, I mean, as she said, Nirmin was the last person that she really had and she really could speak with. And this Armenian hairdresser is taking Nirmin away from her. So she really now notices that she has nobody now. Nirmin was her last hope after Sami and Adil have passed away, and even him, this Armenian hairdresser takes her away from her. And because I mean, if we go back to the Syrian society, I mean, marrying a Muslim marrying a Christian is unacceptable. And especially at that time, it was totally unacceptable. And especially that Nermin was already married, yeah? So that's one thing. And marrying a Christian is something. And a barber and also hairdressers have a bad reputation also among the society, you know, they don't really have, nobody from a good family would marry off their daughter to a hairdresser or a barber. So from both sides. So
Can you explain that a little bit, Reem? Why is that?
Yeah, because I mean, because they meet lots of people and they do the hair of lots of people. So they're considered as somebody who, you know, mingle with a lot of people, you know, there's the touching and there's the and it has to do with beauty. I mean, if you remember, even Abu Raghib, when Raghib wanted to open a shop where he would be selling cosmetic and perfume, he was very angry with him, and you just want to attract, you just want to attract a woman, and if you really wanted to, you know, be a real trader, a real merchant, you would have thought of something sensible, you know, something eligible. But I mean, so there is this, you know, this profession which are considered for the low caste or for those who have not as high morals as other classes have. And being a hairdresser is one of these low class. I mean, even in Yemen, if you go to Yemen now, nobody from a good family would marry off his daughter or marry off her son to somebody who works as a hairdresser or as a barber. It's considered a low caste profession. And
it actually, go ahead.
Yeah, and being Christian, so it's two sides. So all of a sudden, Sabrine, you know, remembers it's a traditional woman in Syria, thinking the same way that her parents would think, and it's only when Nermin speaks about you love Adil that she notices that she has actually discriminated against her friend. But I think it's out of not jealousy of Nermin, but rather jealousy of the fact that Nermin is being taken away from her.
Yeah. I think what you've just said about the hairdresser and, you know, how they're considered a lower caste, I mean, that is definitely something I connected with, because in India we have the caste system, and it is very difficult for people from two different communities, be they different religious communities or different people belonging to different castes. There is a huge there's violence against the couple, and oftentimes they are also killed, and it is called an honor killing.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Okay. I mean, it's the same in all over the MENA region. Yeah.
what I was thinking was immediately when I read this, I immediately thought about India and how even in India, full expression of love is not encouraged, especially between people who belong to different communities. And
Yeah.
one question that I had for you, does it have anything to do with colonialism? That do you think that it is that somehow people living in post-colonial societies have a slightly more complicated relationship with love? Like, we can't fully let ourselves love,
Yeah. I'm sure colonialism fueled it. I'm sure of that. But I think it's long before colonialism. I think, the class system, to be honest, Islam has tried to eradicate the class system and to show that everyone is equal. But I think it's just deeply rooted in the community from thousands, not just hundreds of years, but thousands of years. The class system has always been there in the Arabian Peninsula, and it has moved on with those migrating from Arabian Peninsula to the other part of the world. So I think, I think it's more, it's an deeply rooted, very old and deeply rooted. But the colonialism did further fuel it, and especially due to the fact that you have those pro-Western educated versus the more traditionally educated, and then you have the conservative versus the modern. You have also the merchant versus the professors and the academic. So all this, yes, it had fueled the class system. And if you do want to ask me about how the status is in Syria today, I would say that
Yeah, my question was, in fact, I'm so glad that you mentioned that, because my question, if there was a girl like Sabriya today in today's Syria, would she be able to become a teacher or to marry whoever she wants?
to an extent, yes, but if she still belongs to the conservative families, no, she won't. Or with difficulties, but not as much as in the 1920s or 1930s. It's become a bit less of an issue than it was, but that does not mean that it has been completely eradicated. And also, don't forget that within the law, if we look at the personal status law in Syria, you can, if you are a Christian man and you want to marry a Muslim girl, the law does not allow you to, unless you convert and become a Muslim. So, I know cases where, yes, you have the interreligious marriages, and some of them just go and register their marriages in another country and come back. But there are issues even in the law, so even the law doesn't give you the same rights. But if Sabriya wanted to marry Adil at that today, yes, it's a bit easier because Adil is the same religion as she is. Still, the class issue would be a problem still. But maybe if she kept on, if she's determined, the family would ask for, for a big dowry, and they would ask for other things. Yeah, it's not as difficult as it was, 100 years ago or so.
I want to now end with just one last passage from Sabriya. And before I do, Reem, I wanted to just thank you so much for being here and for being such an engaging guest, and to have really filled in the gaps for me and for my listeners about Syria and the situation there, both past and present. So I just wanted to thank you. I will thank you in the end, but thank you so much for being such an enthusiastic participant.
Thank you, dear. I really enjoyed it also. Thank you for inviting me. It was
Shukran
lovely.
كثير حبيبتي. شكرا كثير. Okay. When I open the windows, a playful breeze brings in the scent of roses and jasmine, of citron and zilif. There's no lovelier place in the morning. When you're in bed, you can look out on the whole of Damascus. Its huge domes, its slender minarets, its roofs that join up with each other. The sky, clear blue or studded with clouds, or a flight of pigeons released by breeders in the area. So, this is like a nice scene that I want to end with, because I think it's it can be looked, I don't know, I think that this book can be looked at one way is obviously a tragedy for Sabriya. On the other hand, it's also a look at how, even though she had such little choice, she did still find a way to live a life that, where sometimes in moments she is content with it, and she has decided for herself that this is the life that I will be living, and somehow there's acceptance, and I think that there's some beauty in that. Yeah, do you want to add anything else?
No, I mean, I think yes, this it's really, it's really lovely the way Ulfat tries to, despite that this is a sad story, everything, but she does try to show aspects of beauty where, despite everything, despite despair, a person can find some aspects of beauty to hold on to. So this is really important. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Reem. Thank you once again.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, thank you for your time. Thank you for your Sunday. And
you're most welcome.
Yeah, and so basically that's it. This is the first episode of our podcast, and I was recording today with Rim Aljabi, my friend, and the book that we read today was Sabriya, Damascus Bittersweet. Next month, we will be bringing you a book from Kenya, which I will be discussing with another friend of mine, Sarah Salahin. Stay tuned for that. And once again, Rim Aljabi, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, dear. Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.